لما ضرب الصاروخ التاني علينا صحيت، اللي لقيت كله حجار، عرفت إنه رجلي مقطورة.
Now, while Burlington is the largest city in Vermont, Bridgeport is the largest city here in Connecticut. The politicians representing Bridgeport in Congress, Senator Chris Murphy, Senator Richard Blumenthal, and Congressman Jim Himes, are the ones who can truly pressure the US government into calling for a ceasefire.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to the Struggle Video News. We start with a 12-year-old girl who lost her leg and most of her family in an Israeli attack. Notice her calm and her hopes for the future. This was part of an interview done by Defense of Children International Palestine during the November truce.
لما ضرب الصاروخ التاني علينا صحيت، اللي لقيت كله حجار، عرفت إنه رجلي مقطورة لأنه كان في دم وما كانش في إلي رجل. لو كنت أحركها ما كانتش تتحرك. طبعا اللي استشهد اللي هم ماما، بابا، أخوي محمد وأختي داليا. حدا يطلع لي برا، اللي هو يسفرني برا أي دولة، إني أطلع برا بس عشان أركب رجلي وأصير أمشي عليها زي الناس، يعني عشان أصير أمشي، أطلع، أنزل، ألعب مع أخواتي. نفسي أصير دكتورة زي هدول الدكاترة اللي بعالجونا، عشان برضو إحنا نعالج أطفالنا. أنا بدي إشي واحد بس، إني أتخلص الحرب.
So impressive. We left out the last few seconds of the video. Dunia Abu Mohsen was killed on December 17th when an Israeli tank shelled the maternity ward of the hospital in Khan Yunis, where the little girl was being sheltered. Your tax money helped pay for her murder. You may have seen the Israeli video that showed supposed Hamas fighters throwing down their rifles after being captured. But it was bizarre. The men had their shirts off and were bare-chested. So we're supposed to believe the IDF had them take their shirts off and then take their rifles up again. The word staged seems or comes to mind. Anyway, Palestinians immediately recognized many of the people and said they were not fighters at all. This is one of the men who was spotted. He is Nasser Imad al-Din al-Madhoun. On Twitter, someone wrote, he's a distinguished doctor going on a 4th year of study. He is one of the medical staff of Kamal Adwan Hospital. Occupation Army forced him to bear arms and displayed him as a Hamas warrior, surrendering. The United Nations reports the Kamal Adwan Hospital has been destroyed and that many of the health workers there have been detained. We come back again and again to the deaths of the premature babies at the Al-Nasr hospital in Gaza City. The atrocity has been covered now by many national news sources, but for some reason not by the New York Times. Our parent group, the Middle East Crisis Committee, has started a petition directed to the news editors of the Times. Use this QR code to see it. Hope you can sign the petition. I personally am haunted by what the babies must have suffered as they die. Note, Mohammed Balusha, the Palestinian journalist who did the video of the hospital ward with the baby's remains, was shot in the leg in Jabalia camp by an Israeli sniper. Balusha was taken to the Al-Ali hospital where there's still a bit of medical service. He was treated for a double fracture in his hip. This brings up the glaring fact that there are still many people in the north and center of the Gaza Strip, probably thousands, even though the Israeli military would like to have these areas become free fire zones. We know of one case of a man whose job is distributing aid. He's holed up in the ruins of his home with his family, with his 2 children and his wife, who has just given birth to their 3rd child. He has medical conditions and desperately needs medicine. Al-Shifa hospital and all the Palestinian hospitals must be restored. And just as importantly, all people in Gaza should have the right to go on the streets freely without being shot at by Israeli soldiers. You recall we've been taking apart the Israeli lies about the hospitals in Gaza for many weeks. The Washington Post on December 21st published their investigation and essentially confirmed what we've been saying about Al-Shifa Hospital, where the IDF had said Hamas had its command center. This is kind of a bland headline, but the report is devastating. I read a few sentences from the article. The rooms connected to the tunnel network discovered by IDF troops showed no immediate evidence of military use by Hamas. None of the 5 buildings identified by Hagari, he's the Israeli military spokesperson, appeared to be connected to the tunnel network. There is no evidence that the tunnels could be accessed from inside the hospital wards. In other words, it was all a lie. Further, the article says, the targeting by a U.S. ally of a compound housing hundreds of sick and dying patients and thousands of displaced people has no precedent in recent decades. The march on Al-Shifa caused the hospital's operations to collapse. As Israeli troops closed in and fighting intensified, fuel ran out, supplies could not enter, and ambulances were unable to collect casualties from the streets. The Post also talked about the video that the Israelis have been circulating about an interrogation of the director of the Kamal Adwan hospital. After arresting the hospital's director, Ahmed al-Khalut, Israel released an interrogation video Tuesday in which Khalut admitted to being a member of Hamas and said the hospital was under the control of the Izzuddin al-Qassam brigades, the group's armed wing. In response, Gaza's health ministry said the statement was made under the force of oppression, torture, and intimidation to justify successive crimes, especially against the health system. Academic and influencer Idris Ahmed noted on Twitter that there were similar confessions in Syria when Assad forces would conquer a hospital. We in MECC are preparing this banner to insist that Israel stop its atrocities and that all Gaza hospitals be reopened, restocked, and restored. Senator Bernie Sanders is sponsoring a resolution that would force Senate debate on what even Biden calls Israel's indiscriminate bombing. It's a privileged resolution that couldn't be sent off to some committee to die. Call your senators and ask them to co-sponsor Sanders' Resolution 502B. Again, that's Sanders' 502B resolution, promoting enduring peace, and the Middle East Crisis Committee both think this is a good idea. Now, from the public comments, in Bridgeport, Connecticut, whose city council is considering a resolution calling for a ceasefire.
I'm here today to talk about the urgent and crucial issue of the need for a ceasefire in Palestine, all of Palestine. I'm Palestinian, I have a family in West Bank, I have family that was killed by the IDF. I've experienced threats, mistreatment, and fear of losing my life while visiting family in Palestine. We all have someone we look up to. My role model is my 22-year-old cousin, Ala Muhammad Shahab, who lived in Kalandia, a small town in the West Bank. He was killed on March 15, 2022 by the IDF while feeding his birds on his balcony. The IDF sniper shot one bullet straight to his head. He was innocent, with no weapons, no crime, just killed for no reason. In their eyes, it was practice.
I was born in a refugee camp in South Lebanon after the Nakba, which is the catastrophe of 1948. In that year, the Zionist militia, protected by the British Army, committed genocide and ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian population. My grandparents were among those displaced. Majority of those living in peaceful cities were expelled to Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. The apartheid state of Israel continued to commit massacres over the next few decades, including Egypt in 1970, Sabra and Shatila refugee camp in Lebanon in 1982, Qana in South Lebanon in 1996, and now in Gaza. Palestinians are facing the same devastation 75 years later in front of the whole world. We are watching children, women, elderly, and civilians being slaughtered with U.S. weapons.
I have been a Bridgeport resident for the past 33 years. My family is from Humacao, Puerto Rico. I am a wife, a mother, a sister, an aunt, a daughter, and a teacher. But most importantly, I am a Christian. My Bible teaches me that I have to be my brother's keeper. Those in Gaza and in the West Bank are my brothers and sisters. I'm trying my best to be their keeper. How can I be their keeper when my hard-earned tax dollars are going to funding weapons and ammunition to kill innocent people who are with no food, water, medicine, communication, and shelter? Children are dying, and those who are still alive have watched their parents, siblings, grandparents, and cousins die. I've seen and followed the journey of two young Palestinian heroes, Bisan and Motaz, who are disappearing right before our eyes. These Palestinian heroes are journalists, and through their eyes, the rest of the world gets to see what is really going on in Gaza. Bisan and Motaz have been reporting on the destruction of their own people and their own homeland while they are only 24 and 25 years old. My heart aches for them and their people. My heart aches with the rest of my brothers and sisters who you are hearing from today. We're asking you to take a stand and demand an end to Israel's genocide of the Palestinian people. We demand an immediate and permanent ceasefire. With a ceasefire, we will save lives. All of us here should be able to agree that saving human life is an important and urgent concern for us. I cannot begin to imagine the pain that the people of Palestine are going through. They don't know where their next meal is going to come from or whether or not they will have shelter or a warm place to stay. They do not have safety. They do not know if they will be alive even in the next second with the bombs Israel is dropping from above.
I speak to you as a mother of two young Palestinian children. I have been watching a genocide through my screen for the past 72 days. We are exhausted and heartbroken at the images and videos we are witnessing of children being murdered. They are being deprived of food, water, and shelter. It is winter in Palestine, and they are sleeping on the ground in the freezing rain. We have seen children getting their limbs amputated without anesthesia, children who have to bury their own parents. Infants were left out to die in hospital beds with no mercy due to the brutal Israeli army. And let me tell you, when I look into the faces of those children, I see my children's faces. Words cannot express the amount of pain and guilt I feel, because I feel we as the United States government have failed those kids. Israel claims its violence is about trying to eliminate Hamas. But even though Hamas only has a presence in Gaza, Israel's violence has not been limited to Gaza. They have been killing and terrorizing Palestinians in the occupied West Bank as well. On October 8th, I lost my cousin who was only 16 years old. He was shot and killed for no reason. My cousin is one of the hundreds of Palestinian civilians in the occupied West Bank who have been killed or detained since October 7th. So I'm here today to ask that you support the ceasefire resolution submitted by the council member Nordanis.
Hello, City Council of Bridgeport. My name is Hamza Sial, and I'm a member of BICC. Now, I was born just 5 minutes from here at Bridgeport Hospital 21 years ago, and to this day, I'm still here as an active member of the Bridgeport Islamic Community Center. I'm also Pakistani, I'm a Muslim, and I'm a student at UConn Stanford studying political science. Over the past few weeks, I've seen some people say that it seems pointless for a city council to support a ceasefire resolution for something happening across the world. And to that, I could not disagree with more. This great city of Bridgeport has more influence than you would think. You all as well, respected members of the city council, have far more influence than you would think. 3 weeks ago in Burlington, Vermont, like it was mentioned before, 3 20-year-old Palestinian students were shot in cold blood simply for wearing Palestinian keffiyehs. Last Monday, the City Council of Burlington held a vote to call for a ceasefire resolution. And while the vote tied 6-6, that vote had major influence on what politicians in the state of Vermont felt about a ceasefire. Most notably, one of the most recognizable and popular politicians in the whole country, Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont, made a statement in support of a ceasefire in Palestine last Wednesday. For over 2 months, Senator Bernie's supporters were continuously asking him to support a ceasefire resolution, but he didn't comply. Even after 3 Palestinians were shot in the city he used to be mayor in, he still didn't call for a ceasefire. But 2 days after the City Council of Burlington had a vote on a ceasefire resolution, that is when Bernie finally called for a ceasefire as well. Now, while Burlington is the largest city in Vermont, Bridgeport is the largest city here in Connecticut. The politicians representing Bridgeport in Congress, Senator Chris Murphy, Senator Richard Blumenthal, and Congressman Jim Himes, are the ones who can truly pressure the US government into calling for a ceasefire. I interned with Congressman Himes last year, and I know for a fact he takes note of what is going on in the cities he represents. And I know he, alongside Murphy and Blumenthal, will hear about the vote on the ceasefire resolution that will take place here in the Bridgeport City Council. One thing I always tell my family, which many of which are here today, is that local elections are so important to vote in, because the local officials that we're voting for are the ones who will actually represent us and influence those above to make the right decisions. Members of the City Council, if you pass this ceasefire resolution, I guarantee it will influence those with more power in this state and this country to potentially call for a ceasefire themselves. This incredible community behind me put you all here to represent us. We put our trust in you all, and I can only hope you do the right thing. Thank you.
I would like to thank the Bridgeport City Council for this opportunity to speak in front of you tonight. First, let's get this out of the way. I condemn all civilian deaths that occur on both sides of this conflict for many decades, or since I have lived there back in 1994. I'm over 50, born and raised in Connecticut and married for 29 years to a beautiful woman from the West Bank, whom we both still have a large family living there under occupation that are always in our prayers. We're blessed to have 4 sons who were born in Bridgeport. My 80-year-old mother was born and raised in Bridgeport. My grandmother was an RN at Carpenter Steel for 25 years in Bridgeport. My living 80-year-old father and my deceased father-in-law, which my father is here tonight, he's right there, is 80 years old and was born in Lid, Palestine, and survived the Lid death march of 1948. My father has a history in Bridgeport as well. My father worked at Bonanza. My father worked at Bridgeport High Life for many years. And then he became an engineer and devoted 20 years of his life to assembling the Abrams tank engines with the UAW. He's a very reclusive man that was never affiliated with any political group or ever taught us to hate anyone based on their race or religion, and in fact has always tried to avoid the topic for years with me, but still agreed to come tonight and supported me in my speech. I'm here tonight not only as a concerned taxpayer, but also as a father, a son, a grandson, and a husband, to urge you to support a ceasefire resolution in this ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. This war has claimed the lives of thousands of innocent people, including many children, caused many immense suffering and devastation for both sides. The ceasefire is not only a moral duty, but also a strategic necessity for the security and stability of our region and the world.
My name is Yahya Atiyah. I am 70 years old and I am Palestinian. I came to United States almost 50 years ago in 1974 as a student. I studied here. I got married. I worked 16 hours a day for 22 years to raise and take care of my family here. I have grandkids now too. Sadly, the genocide and ethnic cleansing of Palestinian people started on October 7, 23, but 70 years ago. My story started in Jordan, born as a Palestinian refugee from Jerusalem. My family suffered the first Nakba in 1948, forcing them to flee to refugee camps in Jordan. My parents managed to return to Jerusalem in 1960 when I was a young child, but to a different village. 7 years later, we suffered the 1967 Nakba, another war, when Israeli forces took over the entire West Bank and Jerusalem and forced many Palestinians to leave again. The occupation army came, but my mom refused to leave. Mom, we have war. She said, we immigrated many times. We forced out many times. We're gonna stay here. We die here. It's enough. So we stay in the house. They shut our house a couple of times, but we stay in the house. Today, my sisters, brothers, they live with their families in the house my dad built in Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood of Jerusalem. The Israeli government continued to try to force these families to leave the homes where they have lived for generations to build settlements for other people. The current ongoing attack on Gaza is over 10 weeks old. That means it has been over 70 days of killing civilian Palestinians, including Gaza and the occupied West Bank. The Israeli army continuously targets civilian locations, including residential buildings, churches, mosques, UN refugees, schools, and hospitals. The whole world sees that, but they're doing nothing about it.
This, unfortunately, is not an actual time cover. A tribute should be made to the Palestinian doctors and medical workers instead of Taylor Swift, whose importance to the world in future years will probably look tiny compared to the monumental courage of the doctors helping people in Gaza. Here's an interesting tweet. You know that the demented Netanyahu claims to speak for all Jewish people. Well, the decidedly anti-Zionist group Jewish Voice for Peace, their Instagram account has now surpassed the Israeli government's Israeli Defense Forces Instagram account in number of followers.
Palestina, libertad! Palestina, libertad! Libertad, libertad! Libertad, libertad!
Today is day 70. The people of Gaza have been under bombardment for over 2 months. We're here today to call for the same thing that we've been calling for the past 2 months. The same thing that folks around the world have been calling for the past few decades. A permanent ceasefire and an end of the siege in Gaza and occupation of Israel. Today's rally is a representation of solidarity of oppressed people standing against their oppressors. Whether it's the struggle for freedom and equal rights of black people, brown people, indigenous people, LGBTQ plus people, Palestinians, all of our fights are intertwined. We're standing in front of one of the most reputable medical centers in the world, Columbia Irvine Medical Center, and the New York Presbyterian Hospital System. This institution and this hospital has done us a disservice, not only to its Arab and Muslim students and to Palestinians all across the world, but to its local community as well. Whether it's by perpetuating segregated healthcare in its clinics, covering up the crimes of an abuser disguised as an OBGYN instead of notifying his patients, or Columbia's history of gentrification in the Heights and in Harlem.
I have beared witness to the violent repression of the NYPD against my neighbors. The very same NYPD who has an office in Israel. The very same NYPD who trains in repression tactics with Israeli security forces.
Communities in Harlem and the Bronx are constantly experiencing disinvestment. Disinvestment from their communities, from health, from housing, from decent living. And no amount of medicine or surgeries will fix that. Yet our money and our politicians, from Richie Torres to Eric Adams to Biden, will support sending our money to Israel to fund their healthcare system and their access to care while people here do not have healthcare.
Nice to see that CBS noted that all festivities in Bethlehem, Palestine were called off this year because of the war, or as it should be more properly called, the genocide. They also included this nativity scene from the Lutheran Church in Bethlehem in this coverage. That's our program for today. If you cannot go demonstrate, educate. This has been Stanley Heller for the Struggle Video News.